Awesome, great. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. We're really excited about talking to you about Subscribe to Open, and what we really want to do today is to get as much feedback from all of you on ways we can work together on this. So we're going to be keeping the presentation part relatively short, and then there'll be an interactive portion sort of towards the end. But before we get started, so for those of you that don't know me, although I think I know most of you by now, my name is Sarah and I'm our open access publisher, and co-hosting with me today is Ben. Ben, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yes, hello, very nice to meet you all. You'll have to forgive me, I don't know many of you because I only started back in July. I'm essentially the maternity cover role for Margarita, and I'm sure you all know Margarita, who is currently enjoying motherhood. So it's a great privilege to be here. It's obviously a very exciting time to be here because just a few months after I started, the model is completely changing. Maybe not completely, but Sarah and I will talk about how things are changing the next year over the next few slides. And yeah, look forward to meeting you.
Great, thanks, Ben. So as I already mentioned slightly, so we're going to talk a little bit firstly about just what Subscribe to Open is, and then how we hope to move towards open access through Subscribe to Open. And then we'll really spend the most of today. We're going to break you up into smaller breakout rooms and have discussions around some of the outcomes we hope to get from this meeting. And then we'll all come back, share some of the things we've discussed, and hopefully take some good things away from today. So before I get into Subscribe to Open, I just wanted to remind everyone what open access is firstly. So if a research output is open access, it really means that anyone, anywhere can read it. And what's also key is that there's often licensing around open access, which means that anyone can reuse the content. They can do translations, they can disseminate it freely amongst their peers, colleagues, different groups in different countries. And so there's a lot more you can do with open access content than you would with subscription content. And importantly, you're not paying for it. So really anyone can read it anywhere. And so before I get into S2O, where are we now? So right now we have a mix of traditional subscription journals, which are the 10 on the right, and we have 5 fully open access journals already, which are the ones on the left. So you might be familiar with some of these titles already. The titles that are open access right now predominantly operate on an author pay model. So that means that authors are paying right now to publish in them, but anyone can read any of the content in the journals. With the traditional subscriptions, they are being paid for by libraries, and it's free to submit unless authors want to publish open access, in which the case they also have that option, but they're still paying for it. And so looking a little bit more closely at these models, again, it's really a question of where the money is coming from. So with traditional subscriptions, the money is normally coming from libraries paying for those subscriptions. Sometimes there are individual subscriptions or pay-per-view charges, but the author submits and there's no charges at that point. With an open access APC model, which is what our current 5 open access journals are operating under, the author pays to submit, or it comes from one of their grants, or we have institutional agreements set up where an institution will cover the author charges, but really the money from that instance is coming from the individual paper, and then the whole journal is free to read. Under Subscribe to Open, what we're trying to do is we're trying to take money that was historically being paid by libraries and institutions for the journals, and we're trying to turn that into a subscription for open access. And the idea behind Subscribe to Open is that we would go to all of our current subscribers and say, you're paying us this amount right now to access the journals. Will you continue to pay this amount under a Subscribe to Open model? We will make the journal completely open access. Your authors won't have to pay to publish in it. Everyone anywhere can read it. And it will be completely free. So that's sort of the model that we're hoping to achieve with these 10 journals. There are also some other advantages for us. For instance, with some of the other open access models, we have a lot of additional infrastructure that we have to implement, and the libraries have to do that as well, which is often costly because you have to identify each individual paper. And with Subscribe to Open, we don't have to identify papers when they come in. Everything will automatically be waived. They will be made open access freely. So that's sort of the model. And the journals that we're focusing on for Subscribe to Open are essentially the ones that are not already open access. So there are 10 currently hybrid subscription journals. And through, I'm going to move you guys, I don't know if you can see those points there, but through open access, we're going to be, or through Subscribe to Open, we're going to be making the content in the last 5 years open access. So the archives will still exclusively be given access to members who support Subscribe to Open. So that's another incentive for people to support Subscribe to Open. And there's also a scope to give the archives to other potentially IWA members or other people who are within our networks. And key is that we're going to be making all articles that are published from next year open access under an open access license. So it'll be slightly different from us just making the content free to read. Those will have all of those licenses from the 1st of January. And again, key is that there will be no author charges. So how are we going to still make money under this, and how are we going to sort of get there? What we've done is we've taken the revenue that we made on those 10 journals in 2019, and we've set that as a revenue target. And the breakdown of that revenue in 2019 was, you can see here, the largest percent of that comes from subscriptions. But there's another portion of our revenue that comes from other things like author charges for open access articles, for pay-per-view. So when someone doesn't have a subscription to the journal, but they just want to get one article, they would pay for that currently. From member subscriptions, and a few other things are in there as well. And so what we're trying to do with Knowledge Unlatched, and what we've partnered with them with, is to essentially renew all of this current subscription revenue and turn it into Subscribe to Open. So we're hoping that this chunk here will be covered by renewals. Knowledge Unlatched are also working really hard to get us new subscriptions, and to also get libraries that were historically subscribing to maybe 1 or 2 journals, but to get them to subscribe to Open to the whole package. So we're trying to make extra money as well with Knowledge Unlatched to also cover some of this other revenue. But that's another area that we wanted to talk to you about today, because we're going to be doing a lot of other activities to try to make up for this revenue that we might not be getting through extra subscriptions. And so Ben will go into that in a little bit more detail now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Ben, handing over to you.
Thanks very much. Wonderful. Thanks very much, Sarah. It's very, if you're like me, it's very counterintuitive what we're doing. We're taking something that we have traditionally put a high value on, i.e. a subscription to our journals, and we're making them essentially freely available. And at the same time, we're asking people who have traditionally supported us through subscriptions to continue to support us. So I thought it would be helpful just to reiterate what the 3 advantages are for traditional subscribers to maintain their subscription levels. So there are probably more than 3, but the 3 main ones that we're using, the 3 main benefits that we're putting to people when we're speaking to them are as follows. But first of all, by supporting subscribing to Open, university libraries traditionally, that will be the majority of our revenue, of our support, will be increasing global access to knowledge. So many universities and libraries, as I'm sure you're aware, are very concerned to increase open access for the wider good. There are many institutions and universities and organisations in perhaps lower and middle income countries that quite simply can't afford our standard pricing subscription model. And yet many of these institutions are people who need to find out the latest developments in water and wastewater research. They're simply not able to access this vital information. So if you're able to support Subscribe to Open, you're actually supporting people who really need the information that we are producing, publishing and disseminating. So I guess that philanthropic angle is the first one and is really important. Lots of universities actually have been aware of this for a long time and are very keen to see this happen increasingly. I think it's fair to say that certainly in the West, lots of universities are very wary about the traditional subscription scheme, and they see some very big publishers, I guess essentially making lots of money and potentially at the expense of knowledge for those who most need it. So that's the first point, and I think we can't underestimate the importance of this. I guess on a slightly more selfish level for them, the second point, which is that the academics and researchers at these universities who have been subscribers for a long time, they're also, I guess, the people who would often produce a lot of the work that we publish. So the papers that we publish in our journals, until now, have reached a fairly good sized audience. But what we anticipate that when our journals go open access, the amount of traffic, the amount of people reading them and downloading them will increase exponentially. And we saw this over the summer. So as you'll hopefully be aware, when lockdown happened, when COVID happened around the world, we opened up access. We opened up the paywall on our journals, and the leap in traffic that we saw, and importantly from lots of other countries that wouldn't normally be able to access our content, was really significant. So we went from a few thousand readers a month on some of our journals to tens, even hundreds of thousands per month. So of course, if you're a researcher, if you're someone who's written a paper, you want as many people as possible to see that and to use it and to cite it. So that's a really important benefit to university libraries to continue to support IWA. I think the third as well is it's also, I guess, a very tangible benefit to the university libraries. The majority of our subscribers subscribe to 3 journals or fewer. In fact, many of them just subscribe to 1. But we know from some recent tracking that we've been doing that in fact, all of those universities who don't have a full access all journal subscription, we know that they're trying to access our other journals as well. We can see that when the website tells us that people have tried to get access to a gated article and they've been refused, what we call refusals. So we know that if everyone supports S20, they'll all benefit, because suddenly you'll be able to access all 15 or all 10 of those that were previously subscription only. So it's one of those things where if you're willing as a university library to do something which might on the surface seem a bit counterintuitive, there are actually really powerful benefits, both for you as an institution, but also for the greater good. So how are we going to fill up this pot? So Sarah mentioned that we have a lot of revenue that comes from our traditional longer term subscribers. We have a smaller proportion, I guess, of revenue that won't be coming in naturally once we move to subscribe to open. That might be the author processing charges or whatever it might be. I think it's also fair to say that a lot of people we've spoken to, both in terms of other publishers, but certainly on the library side, will be seeing a squeeze to their budget over the next few years. There's evidence to suggest that the average reduction in university library budgets will be around about 20 to 25% in the US and Western Europe, probably 30% or more in China and some other countries. So university libraries are going to be under a lot of pressure to cut their costs. And I think, or we think, that even if we were still using the traditional model, it would be a tough year or 2 years for us coming up. So those two things combined means that we need to broaden the net of where we're bringing our revenue in from. So on this slide here, you'll see the main sources of revenue that we are looking for. On the left-hand side, our current subscribers, we've got around about 340, 350, many of whom will subscribe, as I mentioned, to more than one journal, but not many who'll subscribe to all 10. Nevertheless, we are looking to these subscribers to renew at either the same level or upgrading. So Sarah's touched on this. KU, you'll see that phrase, upgrade via KU. KU is Knowledge Unlatched. They're a partner organisation that we're working with. They have lots of good contacts at universities around the world, and their mission is to really make open access a thing. They have, of that 340 or so list of subscribers, they've got about 40 or 50 who they are looking to increase the amount of support that they've been giving us. So we are anticipating and hoping that this group here, the current subscribers, will still be the vast majority of our income for next year. And although we don't have anything like a full sense of what that's going to look like yet, we do know that of the roughly 100 or so people who have responded to our initial communications, well over 90% have indicated that they would commit at the same level or more. So there is some reason to be optimistic at this stage. However, the other 4 groups are ones I'll very briefly touch on them, just so you're aware. We've got around about 250, possibly 300 lapsed subscribers, depending on how far back we look. Many of those will be institutions who used to subscribe and perhaps saw low usage figures within their faculties and their departments. But we do know that some of them will be people who will be warm to the idea of supporting open access. So we will be contacting these people with a message of, we are moving to a subscribe to open model, please would you support us? The third group, which is in orange, are the people who we know have used our website, and in many cases significantly used it, but are not subscribers. Without going into lots of detail, one great example is the University of Kent, who are not subscribers, but have been one of the top 15, 20 highest users this year of our website since we've been open access. So there'll be people like that who we can go to with evidence to say, you should support us. And there are loads of them. There are around about 4,500 institutions in Western Europe and North America alone who we know use our website, who don't subscribe. Around the world, we know that there are something like between 2 and 500,000, depending on how we define it. But for reasons of pure ease of getting something done, we're trying to prioritize the ones who we think will have the most budget and most likelihood to support us. And then finally, we've got large and small level supporters. Essentially, we're talking about businesses and organizations. The large corporate supporters, what we have found, and I think what you'll be at least as aware of as we are, is that if you're a large multinational, if you're a manufacturer in particular, whether you're making consumer products or pharmaceuticals or whatever it might be, you will have a corporate social responsibility policy, and a large part of that will be focused on addressing the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Goal number 6 is the responsible use of water, and pretty much every FTSE 100 company has got something in that. So we've already written to Nestle, Suntory, and about to do GSK. And what we're asking these people to do is essentially, as part of their social responsibility policy, to essentially give a donation to make this happen. We think this is also possible at the smaller and medium level, and we're looking at building into the website a way of giving smaller donations. So a little bit like a sort of a Just Giving or a GoFundMe type page. And thanks to Asif and the guys on the membership, we think it might be a good idea to write to lots of the IWA membership with a simple request to support that. So we're hoping that through these things we will get to at least the same level of income as we've had over the last 2 years. Very quickly then, in terms of our timelines, the decision was made earlier this month to proceed with S20. We're contacting all current subscribers and some of these new ones. By mid-November, we will have a good idea about all of our current subscribers, where they're at. And invoices will start to be sent out. We will also know where we've got to on the additional funding. December will obviously be a key month. By the end of December, we will need to decide, have we either generated enough income in the bank, or at least strong commitment to suggest that we can proceed with S20. So that would be a key date for us. If there's some kind of disaster and we can't, then it's fair to say now that we would look to reverting back to our traditional model. But at this stage, we're not anticipating this will be the case. It's just there as a backup. Finally, I thought it would just be helpful just to be very clear to you guys what are the benefits to IWA membership. So without repeating myself, if you used to have access to a smaller number of digital subscriptions, you'll now get access to all 15. I think that's a really important point to stress. You will also face or rather your members would have no author processing charges in the 10 previously subscription journals. It will be full unlimited open access publishing in those journals. Additionally, we're looking at providing access to the archive content. So anything 5 years old or newer would be freely available to everyone. But those S20 subscribers, supporters, would be given access to that older archive content. And of course, there is still the option to have print as part of that. So I think that's where we've got to so far. I hope that's clear. I think one of the things that you can do in these breakout groups that Sarah's about to put us into is make a note of anything that isn't clear, and I'd be very keen for you to do that. What we're really hoping for from the next half hour is that we can answer any questions or find out any questions or sticking points that we may not have addressed yet, but also to work with you guys to understand how can we make S2O a success. So on that note, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand back over to Sarah, if that's all right, Sarah. Sarah's going to put you into some predefined groups, hopefully with lots of people that you know, but also with somebody from IWA Publishing. And there will be a number of questions.
Ben, can I ask a preliminary question?
Yes,
first? Might be relevant. So right at the end, you touched on print journal.
Yes. And
so obviously, how does that work then? Because there are costs associated with, printing and mailing. How does that work in a kind of open access model? I think it's very clear for a kind of a digital market.
It's a really good question, Keith. So for the majority of our subscribers, but actually the majority of our subscribers don't have a print element to it, but actually a significant minority do. Print will still be available for those who really wish it. We're not actively promoting it, but for those institutions who say we need to have this, we'll be using our deeply discounted pricing that we've had previously, so that people at a relatively small additional cost will be able to add that print element to it. Those prices are still yet to be finalised. That will happen on Monday, but yeah, print will certainly be available. It will just be less actively promoted.
Mm-hmm. So it's more like a kind of an at cost type thing.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Sarah, is it worth one of us getting those questions up on the screen?
Yeah, I'm just gonna get them up and then I'll also put them in the chat so that you guys have them once we get into the breakout rooms. So what we would like all of you to discuss in the breakout rooms is amongst yourselves sort of some advantages, benefits you see of S2O for IWA. How might S2O impact your activities? How can we make S2O work for all of us? And how can we work together to make it a reality? And just to give you a little bit more info on the breakout room. So I tried to split them a little bit based on department, but there are quite a few people who didn't say they were going to come and some people who said they were going to come who aren't. So they're a little bit more random than I had initially intended, but I think you'll all have fun anyways. We do want this also to be, a nice way for you to meet also some IWA publishing people. So do start out by introducing yourselves and telling one another a little bit about what you do, and then have a chat about the questions. We do have a moderator in each of the rooms, so they will be able to take notes. And if you want to allocate someone to come back and present to the group at the end, please do. Otherwise, the moderators will present for you. So I'm just going to put these questions now into the chat so you have them. All right. And I have the ability to jump between breakout rooms. So if you have any issues, chat me and I'll jump in to say hi, but otherwise the moderator should be able to help you out. We'll give you about 10 to 15 minutes because then we'd like enough time to come back at the end and sort of feedback on what the different rooms chatted about. So I'm gonna open the rooms now and we'll see you guys in a little bit. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that you all enjoyed your conversations. I know our group had some good talks. So shall we start maybe with group one? I think that's the group Ben was in. Who's presenting for your group, Ben?
Asif.
Hi there. Hi, Sarah. It's
Hi.
Asif, so, of the memberships team. So there's a few things that sort of struck me with this move, and that's sort of expanding the access to the LIC countries. So as most of you are aware, our membership is split into high-income countries and low-income countries, and a lot of the low-income countries find it difficult to afford even just the membership. So this move for open access will hopefully give a bit more of an access to our low-income countries and provide more value in the membership itself, and hopefully try and increase the membership numbers within the low-income countries. So I'm really looking forward to that, and sort of looking at how that changes our membership dynamics. And the second thing, something that Barbara mentioned, was we have our China team has a conference, a virtual conference happening in about 2 weeks or so, 9th of November. This is, I think it's a fairly big conference. It's going to be a virtual conference, and I think we can perhaps promote the move to open access on there as well, just to sort of let people know that this is the way we're heading as well. So our China membership network is quite large, and there's a few sponsors within that event that may be interested in supporting the move to open access as well. So yeah, I think just those are the few things that we may discuss.
Great, thanks, Asif. That's really helpful. I think, yeah. Well, Ben, you were in that room, so I think you're probably excited about the potential to work together on sponsorship and things. So, group 2, I think Sarah, that's your group. So whoever is presenting from your group.
Yeah, I was going to present. If anyone wants to jump in and interrupt me or correct me, feel free. So mostly everyone seems really positive, particularly the reach of the reach that we'll get with our publications, and how that will really help with the visibility of IWA and its missions, as well as IWA publishing. Also for lots of young professionals who are, say, leaving university, people that don't have access to big institutions or to funding, will be able to get so much more research that will be helpful to them. And also being able to publish open access without limits will be really helpful, particularly for those young researchers and people in low-income countries. Sorry, I have so many notes. We had lots of good ideas. It's also a great opportunity maybe to work more closely with NGOs and different companies and be more collaborative, all very good for IWA's sort of reputation as well, and just making things more accessible, particularly in the time of COVID, where there have been complaints of people, say corporate members that have had print journals and they can't get into campus. They've been asking for more and more digital, and it just seems to make sense. A couple of issues we came up with was, first of all, Kirsten had a very good point about how sometimes digital can be difficult in low-income countries, particularly where internet can be problematic and it can be very expensive. Downloading huge files can be problematic, so something to bear in mind. Also, there's that question about thinking of added value for becoming a member. So things like opening up the archives and thinking of new incentives to join and keep on with your membership. Sorry, I think the main thing we came away with was in how we could make it work is just lots of comms for members, maybe some webinars, some sort of information so everyone understands what's changing, why it's good, and presenting at conferences when possible, things like that. And yeah, I think those were the main things really. Anyone from my group wants to add, they can. But
no? Okay, great. Thanks, Sarah. Next is Laura's group. Laura, are you presenting or is someone?
Yeah, unless, like Sarah said, if I get anything twisted, just let me know. So what was really interesting is we had Jay, who's from the Indian office of IWA. So I think this is we spoke about how it'd be a really good opportunity for us to work kind of and find out more about our Indian institutions and what they want, and kind of suggested that maybe we should look at kind of contacting them separately and surveying them separately, because I mean, I know personally, having negotiated with only a couple of our Indian institutions, they are very stringent on budgets and kind of what they're looking for, etc. So maybe if in the conversation with the subscribe to open kind of pitch, things do get complicated, we can draw on our relationship with the Indian office of IWA and work together there. Another really interesting thing that came up is because we had Billy, who's from the specialist groups, and Mercedes, who deals with the events, that this is a great kind of preliminary marketing tool, because Billy mentioned that before webinars, sharing preliminary reading, it was often restrictive, because I mean, you don't want to share something that's got a paywall on, because that kind of feels a little bit underhanded in a way, like, yeah, come to our webinar, buy this article. So that will kind of open that up massively as well, and kind of, it's a massive engagement tool as well, we kind of said, because if there's an event going on that there's someone who's written a paper, it doesn't matter if it's open access or not, people attending will be able to read it beforehand. And it's, yeah, just generally it kind of opens up all of our publications to be used in so many different areas. Another thing we kind of spoke about was, again, ensuring that there's a membership kind of, there is still incentive there, and I think we really have to draw upon the opening the full archives as opposed to just the 5-year access, because I mean, Niall mentioned that there's papers on there from like the 70s from WST and from the 60s of the Water Quality Research Journal, and although that might not be kind of like cutting edge research, it's still a nice thing to be able to go back and access all of that and see that. So I think we need to get one thing I would take away is, because I don't feel like when I'm explaining that, sometimes I have what it is that we're offering like really clear. So I think we need to work on kind of our messaging surrounding archives versus the 5 years, so that it's clear that that is a really big incentive of both membership and subscribing to open. But yeah, really positive and exciting, and yeah, lots of questions. Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks, Laura. So I'm presenting for our last group, and going last is always the case. We touched on quite a few points that have already been mentioned, including sort of the promotion and sharing things before webinars is a great sort of learning tool, that in fact it might actually increase the discussion in webinars and certain events if people have more reading beforehand. And the hope is also that there might then be more material to host other events, and people are inspired by other articles that they read. We also talked quite a bit about the benefits for PhD students, for various people all over the world, and also a little bit about the risk with the model and what are some of the incentives for people to subscribe. And I realized that I didn't quite make it clear too in my initial presentation that one of the key aspects with Subscribe to Open for a subscriber is that it really is a community action model. And so it is only through everyone in the community resubscribing that we can really make it open access. And so for an individual librarian, the choice is, please, subscribe to Open. And if we're successful, the journals will be open, you'll have access. If it isn't successful, your subscription will then default to a normal subscription and you'll still have access. However, if they don't subscribe at all, there is still that risk that they would lose access if there isn't the full buy-in from the community. And so that is an aspect of this that's important, that everyone really needs to come together for this. We also talked about just some of the nitty gritty in terms of we might need to update a few things on the CRM, and that one of the we talked a bit about messaging and to make clear the philanthropic aspect of this, and to include a lot of statistics on why open access is great so that people can actually see the numbers. For instance, that all of our open access articles are are read on average 8 times more than our non-open access articles, and so that there would be this greater visibility for all of these open access articles. And so essentially the quote was, "Numbers don't lie," so we will show the numbers. That's pretty much it from our summary. At this point, I just wanted to open it up to anyone to ask either Ben or I any last minute questions. You can also, please feel free to email us. I think you, my email is just sboshart@iwap.co.uk, and Ben is bcordle@iwap.co.uk. So if you have any other questions, do email us, or feel free to ask them now. You can also write them in the chat if you want.
We spoke briefly in our group about Sci-Hub and things like that and illegal downloads. It just made me, I've just been thinking about it, like, because Laura spoke about Sci-Hub as horrible, and I surrounded by publishers, suddenly I think probably it is to you guys. But I just worked for 3 years for an NGO in Mexico, and as we were saying, like low-income countries, to me Sci-Hub was a savior in a way. Like, and I know that sounds bad maybe, but for those kind of groups, like the choice between paying $38 for a paper or nothing is kind of no choice at all. And we were always just imagining like some big institutes are paying for this research, you know. So almost if this model works, then the opportunity to pay like $5 or what you will for a paper on one-off basis is much more attractive to those kind of groups, I'd say. And so then also you actually have the data of who's reading, especially if you collect email addresses when they download for free, things like that. So, you know, you don't have that data at all. So to me, it's more the choice. It's not like these groups aren't getting access to this research. It's like they're doing it illegally and no one's getting the data. So in a way, that's kind of a different way of thinking about it. These groups are still getting access to the research, just not through us, you know?
Yeah, no, and that's actually a really great point as well, because how do you change behavior then if people are just so used to going to Sci-Hub for everything? And why not? Because it's easy and you'll instantly find it. But how do you ensure that they would then go the more legitimate route if they knew it was open access? But ultimately, I guess it'll be the same, you know, it'll be open either way. So yeah, Sci-Hub is one of those controversial, but you can't fault it, right? They're giving access to research, and as an ex-researcher, I also, you know, it's nice to be able to go there and be able to access it. But yeah, having our stuff available on our site will hopefully have people go there instead, or go through Google. Yeah.
If I could just add to that point about the benefits to libraries and institutions, that actually by going open access, we're reducing that risk to libraries and institutions that Sci-Hub pose, because the main risk is Sci-Hub poses isn't to publishers, it's to the security of the universities. And actually, you know, we're doing universities a service with this.
Do you mean because of their taking the papers from?
I mean, stealing students' credentials and accessing, you know, really valuable content within an institution that institution may not want to be seen. So, you know, we're actually helping protect institutions with open access.
Thanks, Noah. Any other last minute points? Questions? No? Okay, well, thank you all for joining us today. And as I said, you know, feel free to email any one of us. We're happy to answer questions. But otherwise, we'll be in touch on different areas that we identified to work together on some things, and you'll hear from us in the next couple weeks.
Thanks, everyone.